The first thing to hit me wasn't the light, but the sound. A relentless, high-pitched thrumming, like a single furious mosquito, had taken up residence directly between my ears and was practicing for a tiny, insect-sized Metallica concert. The second thing was the taste. My tongue felt like it had been used to sandpaper a badger, a very old, very dusty badger. I cracked an eyelid. The world was a smear of painful Saturday morning light. My head, I quickly surmised, felt like a snow globe full of angry bees. And the only cure, the only thing that could possibly silence the buzzing and placate the furious badger on my tongue, was a gut-buster burrito from a little shack across town called El Fuego. This wasn't just a want, it was a biological imperative, a mission of mercy for me. My body was a temple, and right now, that temple was being picketed by the angry ghosts of last night's tequila shots. The gut-buster, with its unholy trinity of chorizo, ghost pepper cheese, and extra jalapenos, was the only exorcist qualified for the job. I performed the delicate maneuver of swinging my legs out of bed, a process that took on the complexity and grace of a rhino attempting ballet. I found yesterday's jeans on the floor, pulled them on, and grabbed a t-shirt that might have been clean. Sunglasses were a medical necessity. I patted my pockets, phone, wallet, keys, good to go. Stumbling through my living room, I ignored the beige walls, the beige carpet, and the beige couch that had come with this beige house in this beige slice of suburban purgatory known as Crestwood Bellamy Park. When I'd bought the place 6 months ago, the realtor had called it a harmonious community with strong aesthetic values. I now understood that aesthetic values was code for a militant obsession with the color taupe. I pulled open the front door, squinting against the assault of the sun, and shuffled toward the driveway, my mind already halfway to El Fuego. I could almost taste the glorious, artery-hardening grease, and then I stopped. The world went silent, save for the bee mosquito concert in my skull. I blinked, taking off the sunglasses as if they were malfunctioning, but the view remained the same. Empty. My driveway, a pristine slab of HOA-approved concrete, was utterly and devastatingly empty. Where the beast should have been, there was nothing. No reactor green paint job so bright it offended the sun. No 37-inch mud terrain tires that left paleontologists wondering if a new species of dinosaur had been discovered in suburbia. No 10,000-pound winch on the front bumper, no bumper sticker on the back that proudly proclaimed, "Dirtier than your mom's Prius." My Jeep was gone. My first thought, a product of my addled brain, was, did I park it somewhere else? I did a slow, creaking 360-degree turn, scanning the street. I saw Mrs. Henderson's sensible sedan, Mr. Gable's minivan, a sea of beige, gray, and white transportation appliances. No beast. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the hangover haze. It wasn't just a car. It was my weekend therapy, my escape pod from this pastel prison. It was 4 years of saving, of late nights spent in the garage with greasy knuckles and a happy heart. It was stolen. Someone had come into the heart of Crestwood Bellamy Park, the safest, most boring place on earth, and stolen my Jeep. I turned to run back inside to call the cops, and that's when I saw it. A crisp, white rectangle of paper, taped to my front door with unnerving precision. The font was an offensively cheerful cursive, the kind you'd see on a Live, Laugh, Love sign. It was from the Crestwood Bellamy Park Homeowners Association. My blood ran cold, then instantly flash-boiled into pure, unadulterated rage. I knew, this wasn't a theft. This was an execution. I ripped the notice from the door. "Violations," I muttered, my voice a low growl. "Plural? What did I do, mow my lawn in a non-regulation pattern?" I scanned the list, each item a tiny, passive-aggressive dagger to the heart. Unapproved vehicle modification. Tires exceeding 35-inch diameter limit as per Bylaw 6, Section 2. Non-standard vehicular. Color, reactor green. Not found on the approved palette of 12 earth tones. See Addendum F. Prohibited equipment. Winch and high-intensity LED light bar deemed industrial equipment and a visual nuisance. Offensive language. Bumper sticker containing suggestive and community-unfriendly language. Aesthetic disharmony. General presence of vehicle found to be disruptive to the serene and uniform visual landscape of the community. And there, at the bottom, the final, brutal sentence. In accordance with Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C, the vehicle has been removed to maintain community aesthetic harmony. It is located at reliable towing. All associated fees are the responsibility of the homeowner. Aesthetic harmony? I roared to the empty street. It's a Jeep, not a watercolor painting. There was only one person in this entire beige wasteland who could wield the phrase aesthetic harmony with such venomous, soul-crushing intent. A woman who patrolled the cul-de-sac with a clipboard and the grim certainty of a North Korean traffic cop. A woman whose name was probably something normal like Susan or Linda, but who was known universally by a single, terrifying title. Carol. Or, as I and the rest of her terrified subjects called her, HOA Karen. And I was going to pay her a visit. I didn't bother with the sidewalk. I stormed across my perfectly manicured HOA-mandated lawn, my flip-flops making angry slapping sounds on the grass. Her house was a mirror image of mine. Only her beige was somehow beiger. The lawn was a carpet of impossible green, the flower beds organized with military precision, and not a single blade of grass dared to defy her will. She was there, of course. Dressed in a pink tracksuit, wearing a sun visor the size of a satellite dish, she was on her knees by a rose bush. She wasn't just gardening. She was performing surgery, meticulously trimming a single, infinitesimally small brown spot from a leaf with a pair of silver scissors that looked like they belonged in a surgeon's toolkit. "Carol," I said. My voice came out low and tight, like a wire about to snap. She didn't look up. A sickly, sweet smile played on her lips. "Chad, good morning. Lovely day for gardening, isn't it? The petunias are really thriving this year. I find that a diluted fish emulsion solution works wonders." "Don't lovely day me?" I seethed. "Where's my Jeep?" "Your Jeep?" She finally looked up, her eyes 2 chips of pale blue ice. She feigned confusion, a skill she had honed to a fine art. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb with me. You had it towed. The notice, the aesthetic harmony. I know it was you." The pretense dropped. Her smile tightened, becoming a thin, triumphant line. "I have no idea what you're talking about on a personal level," she said, emphasizing the word with a little tilt of her head. "However, the HOA, as a collective body, did vote to remove the vehicle." She said the word vehicle like it was something scraped off the bottom of her shoe. "It was a blight, Chad. A garish, green, metallic blight on our otherwise pristine community." "A blight? It's my car, my property. You can't just steal someone's car." My voice was rising, and I could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She fed on this. This was her superfood. "Oh, it wasn't theft, Chad," she corrected me, her tone dripping with condescension. "It was enforcement. You received the warnings, all 12 of them. Laminated, I might add." She stood up, brushing a non-existent speck of dust from her tracksuit. "The bylaws are the bedrock of our community. They protect our property values. They protect our serenity. They protect us from visual chaos. She gestured vaguely in the direction of my empty driveway. You signed the covenant. You agreed to the rules. I agreed to not paint my house purple. I didn't agree to have my car vanished by the beige police. She gave a delicate, theatrical sigh. If you want to retrieve your property, it's at Reliable Towing, on the other side of the industrial park. She let that hang in the air for a moment. Everyone knew about Reliable. It was the place cars went to die. I'm sure they'll be happy to assist you, provided you have the correct paperwork and, of course, the requisite fees. She smiled again, a final, victorious flash of perfectly capped teeth. Have a wonderful weekend, Chad. I'm going to be planting some new impatiens. The approved shade, of course. She turned back to her roses, dismissing me as completely as if I had ceased to exist. I was left standing there, shaking with a rage so pure it felt like a religious experience, my dreams of a gut-buster burrito replaced by visions of biblical-level vengeance. The Uber ride to Reliable Towing was a journey into the seventh circle of hell, or at least the grimiest, most pothole-ridden corner of my county. The driver, a cheerful guy named Kevin, tried to make small talk. Tough morning, huh? Car trouble? He asked, navigating a turn that sent my hungover brain sloshing against my skull. You could say that, I grumbled, staring out the window at the landscape devolving from manicured lawns to dilapidated warehouses and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Well, Reliable will get you sorted, he said, oblivious. They're efficient. Efficient was one word for it. When we pulled up, I realized post-apocalyptic scrap heap was more accurate. It was a vast, dusty lot, a graveyard of automotive misery. Twisted wrecks from horrific accidents sat next to sad-looking sedans with parking boots on them, and in the middle of it all, I could see it. The unmistakable, defiant green of the beast, looking like a caged lion in a petting zoo. The office was a small, grimy shack with barred windows. Behind a thick pane of scratched plexiglass sat a man who looked like he had been chiseled out of granite and left out in the rain for 50 years. He had a magnificent, ZZ top-style beard that seemed to contain remnants of every meal he'd eaten since the Carter administration. He was hunched over a crossword puzzle, a toothpick jutting from the corner of his mouth. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice echoing slightly in the small room. He didn't look up. Yeah? The voice was a low rumble, like gravel being dragged over asphalt. Hi, I'm here to pick up a Jeep Wrangler. It was towed from Crestwood Bellamy Park this morning. He slowly, painfully, lifted his eyes. They were small and dark, and held a terrifying lack of interest in my plight. Got the slip? The what? The release slip, he said, as if explaining something to a particularly dense toddler. From the HOA, the ones who called it in. My heart sank. No, Carol? She just told me it was here. She didn't give me a slip. A corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile, but it looked more like a spasm of pain. No slip. No Jeep. He looked back down at his crossword puzzle. 7-letter word for annoyance, he muttered to himself. Me? I'm the annoyance. Can't you just call them? I pleaded, my hands flat against the cold plexiglass. I can prove it's my car. I have the registration on my phone, my driver's license. Don't care, he grunted. Rules are rules. I get a call from an authorized agent. They send a truck. I get a release slip. Signed by that same agent, you get the truck. Simple. I spent the next 20 minutes locked in a battle of wills I was destined to lose. I tried pleading. I tried reasoning. I tried feigning a medical emergency that required my immediate retrieval of my tactical first aid kit in the glove box. He just sat there, occasionally penciling in a word, I was pretty sure he filled in P-E-S-T for the 7-letter word. Finally, with the sigh of a man being subjected to the greatest inconvenience of his life, he put his pencil down. Fine. Let's say, hypothetically, you go back and get the slip. You know what the fees are? Hope, fragile and stupid, fluttered in my chest. No! How much? He picked up a clipboard and ran a grimy finger down a list. Okay, you got the initial tow fee. That's $250. You got the after-hours call-out fee, 'cause it was before 8 a.m. on a Saturday. That's another $100. You got the administrative fee. Administrative fee? For what? For me doing this, he said, waving his hand around the depressing little office. $75. Then you got the daily storage fee. Daily? It's been here for 3 hours? We charge by the day, not the hour. That's another $75. And a gate fee of $50 for me to, open the gate. He squinted at the paper. Total comes to $550. Cash. I stared at him, speechless. $550. To get my own car back from a prison it never should have been sent to. That's insane. Prices are on the wall, he grunted, pointing with his thumb to a faded, fly-specked sign. And they go up $75 every day at midnight. Clock's ticking. He picked his pencil back up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got a 4-letter word for Hawaiian goose that's been bugging me. Defeated and $550 poorer in spirit, I left the tow yard. My next stop, born of desperation and a refusal to accept this madness, was the police station. Surely this was illegal. Theft by another name, extortion, something. The station had the distinct smell of burnt coffee and quiet despair. I found myself standing in front of another barrier, this one manned by Officer Miller. He was in his late 40s, with a deeply weary face and eyes that had seen every flavor of human stupidity the world had to offer. He was typing something on his computer with 2 fingers, his movements slow and deliberate. "Excuse me, officer," I began, trying to summon my most respectable, law-abiding citizen voice. "I'd like to report a grand theft auto." Officer Miller stopped typing, but didn't look up. "Okay, make, model, year?" "A 2020 Jeep Wrangler, reactor green. It's heavily modified, lifted." He finally looked up, and his typing ceased entirely. A flicker of something, not quite recognition, but a weary premonition, crossed his face. "Hold on. Where was this vehicle stolen from?" "My driveway," I said, puffing out my chest a little. "In Crestwood, Bellamy Park." Officer Miller let out a sigh. It was not a normal sigh. It was a deep, spiritual exhalation that carried the weight of 1,000 similar stories. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning in protest. "Son, let me guess. Was there a homeowners association involved?" My righteous indignation faltered. "Yes. This woman, Carol, she's the head of it. She's on a total power trip. She had it towed because she doesn't like the color." "It's a civil matter," he said, the words coming out flat and tired, as if he'd said them 10,000 times before. He probably had. "A civil matter? She stole my property. It's worth over $50,000. That's grand larceny." "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "She had your property moved because you allegedly violated a contract you willingly signed when you bought your house. We call it legalized theft. But it's still legal. You want to fight it, you gotta get a lawyer. You gotta sue her, or the HOA, in civil court." He leaned forward, giving me a look of profound pity. "Trust me, kid. You'll spend $5,000 on a lawyer just to get your foot in the door. You'll lose months of your life in depositions. And in the end, a judge will probably tell you that you should have read the fine print. Just pay the man. It's cheaper." "So you're not going to do anything?" I asked, aghast. "I can take a report if it makes you feel better," he offered. "But I'm telling you right now, it's going to go in a file cabinet marked civil, and it's never gonna see the light of day again. My advice? Save yourself the paperwork. As I walked out of the police station, the full weight of my situation crushed me. I was trapped in a bureaucratic triangle of doom between a power-mad HOA queen, a gravel-voiced tow-yard pirate, and a legal system that couldn't care less. My anger had curdled into a thick, hopeless despair. That evening, licking my wounds with a cheap six-pack of beer, I was scrolling aimlessly through the Crestwood Bellamy Park Community Forum, a horrifyingly wholesome place full of posts about lost cats and casserole recipes. And then I saw it. A new post from Carol. Reminder, emergency HOA meeting tonight at 8 p.m. at the home of Carol P., 15 Tulip Lane. Agenda, to discuss further sanctions regarding the property at 12 Tulip Lane and to uphold our community standards. All board members are required to attend. 12 Tulip Lane. That was me. Further sanctions? I'd already had my Jeep kidnapped and been sentenced to a summer without access to the community pool. What else were they going to do? Ban me from breathing the HOA-approved air? Rage, fresh and hot, flooded my system. Oh no. I wasn't going to let this happen without a fight. I was going to crash this little kangaroo court. I arrived at Carol's house at 8:02 p.m. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Her living room was even more terrifying than I'd imagined. It was a museum of beige, accented with an alarming number of porcelain cat figurines, each one with cold, judgmental glass eyes. They seemed to stare at me, finding me in violation of some feline bylaw. Carol was standing next to a projector screen. On it was a picture of my Jeep. A huge red circle was drawn around one of my tires. The rest of the board, two timid-looking men in identical beige sweaters and a woman who looked like she was about to burst into tears, sat on Carol's plastic-covered couch, sipping iced tea and nodding along nervously. And as you can see from slide 14, Carol was saying, pointing at the screen with a laser pointer, the aggressive tread pattern of the tires clearly violates the spirit of our neighborly pavement clause in Section 9. I couldn't help it. I snorted. You've got to be kidding me. Neighborly pavement? All heads snapped towards me. Carol barely flinched, her expression hardening. Chad, this is a closed meeting. You're voting on sanctions against me, I said, stepping into the room. I think I have a right to be here. I looked at the terrified board members. Do any of you actually have a problem with my Jeep? Or are you just scared of her? The board members suddenly found the pattern on the carpet incredibly fascinating. Carol's eyes narrowed. The board is in unanimous agreement that your vehicle and your general disregard for the rules is a problem. She clicked the laser pointer. A new slide appeared, a close-up of my winch. Now, on to the matter of further sanctions. Given the flagrant nature of the violations and the homeowner's combative attitude, I propose we implement a compliance adherence fine of $100 per day until the vehicle is either brought into compliance or permanently removed from the community. You can't do that, I yelled. You're just making this up. It's all in the bylaws, Chad, she said coolly. Addendum K, the chronic offender clause. The board has broad discretion. She looked at her trembling minions. All in favor? 3 shaky hands went up. Motion passes, Carol declared, a smug little smile gracing her lips. You'll receive the official notice in the mail. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to discuss the unacceptable shade of marigold Mrs. Henderson planted. I stumbled out of her house, my mind reeling. It wasn't just about the Jeep anymore. This was tyranny. This was a tiny beige dictatorship, and I was its sole political prisoner. I walked home, utterly defeated, the weight of $100 a day settling on my shoulders. My quiet, suburban life had become a waking nightmare. Back in my own beige prison, I did something I should have done months ago. I unearthed the HOA covenant from a pile of mail. It was a document as thick as a phone book, and about as interesting to read. I cracked open another beer, the cheap fizz a small comfort, and started to read. Page after page of mind-numbing legalese washed over me. Rules about trash can placement. Rules about the acceptable decibel level of wind chimes. Rules about the number of guests allowed at the community pool. 6 with 24 hours notice. My brain was turning to mush. I was about to give up, to surrender to the beige tide and just sell my house and move to a cave in Montana. And then I saw it. It was buried deep, in a subclause of a sub-subclause in an addendum about oversized and commercial vehicles. It was a single sentence, so innocuous and boring it was easy to miss. But to me, in that moment, it shone with the light of 1,000 suns. Restrictions on vehicle type, size, commercial branding, and cosmetic modifications do not apply to any vehicle officially designated for emergency, state, or federal government use. I read it once. Then I read it again, my heart starting to pound a frantic, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. I stood up and read it out loud to my empty living room, the words tasting like freedom. Government use, I whispered, a slow, dangerous, beautiful grin spreading across my face. Well, 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 Carol. You want to play by the rules? Let's play by the rules. The plan that bloomed in my mind was audacious. It was insane. It was probably illegal in 17 different ways. But it was also perfect. How does a regular guy, a 30-something IT manager with a hangover and a vendetta, get his Jeep designated as a government vehicle? The question hung in the air, smelling of desperation and cheap lager. For most people, the answer would be, you don't. But I wasn't most people. I was a man with a very specific and very weird ace up my sleeve. That ace was my cousin, Barry. Barry was a good guy, but he was earnest. Painfully so. He wore tweed jackets, unironically, and ran a political blog called Capitals and Coffee. It was a low-circulation affair, mostly read by our aunts and a few lonely people on the internet who really, really cared about state-level agricultural subsidies. But a few months ago, Barry had struck gold. He'd landed a day-in-the-life interview with our state's governor, a man who styled himself Bulldog Bob. Governor Bulldog Bob was a populist masterpiece, a loud, backslapping, folksy politician who talked about the common man in every sentence and whose entire political platform seemed to be a deep, abiding hatred of bureaucracy and red tape. And, as Barry had breathlessly recounted to me for weeks, the governor was a massive gearhead. Barry had shown me the pictures from his blog post. Governor Bob on his sprawling ranch, wearing a cowboy hat, standing proudly next to a pickup truck so jacked up it needed its own stepladder. I grabbed my phone and dialed. "Chad, is everything okay?" Barry's voice was full of nerdy concern. "It's almost midnight." "Barry, my man, my favorite cousin, the Pulitzer Prize winner of the family," I began, laying it on thick. "My blog has 73 subscribers, Chad. What do you want? I need a favor, a huge, life-altering, legend-making favor. I need you to talk to the governor." I could hear him sigh over the phone. "Chad, I can't just call the governor. I was a one-time fluff piece. I'm sure he doesn't even remember my—" "He'll remember you, Barry, because you're going to bring him the greatest PR opportunity of his entire political career." I spent the next 20 minutes laying out the whole sordid tale. The beige tyranny of Carol, the kidnapping of the beast, the tow yard extortion, the kangaroo court, the soul-crushing despair. I painted a picture of a hard-working American, a common man, being crushed under the heel of a petty, overzealous HOA. "Let me get this straight," Barry said. his voice a squeak of disbelief. "Your neighbor, the HOA lady, had your Jeep towed." "A tyrannical abduction, Barry. A blow against freedom. And now you want me to call the governor of the state and ask him to make your Jeep an official government vehicle so you can win a fight over a parking space?" "It's not just a parking space, Barry. It's a symbol." I was pacing now, a general rallying his only, very skeptical soldier. "Think of the story. Think of the headlines for Capitals and Coffee. Governor Bulldog Bob stands with the common man against HOA oppression. Local hero fights back against bureaucratic bullies with governor's help. This is pure 24-karat populist gold. He eats this stuff for breakfast. It's David and Goliath, if Goliath was a 50-year-old woman with a clipboard and David had a really, really cool cousin who was a respected political journalist. I am not a respected." "And," I said, delivering the coup de grace, "you can tell him he can take the beast off-roading next time he's in town. The real trails, not the sanitized ones his security detail makes him use." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in Barry's head. He was picturing it. The exclusive follow-up story. The traffic to his blog. Maybe even a Christmas card from the governor's mansion. I hate you so much right now," Barry said finally. "But it's a hell of a story." "That's my boy, Barry. You're a patriot." "I'm an idiot," he groaned. "I'll see what I can do, but don't get your hopes up. This is the single most insane idea you have ever had." He was wrong. It wasn't insane. It was brilliant. 3 days passed. 3 days of radio silence. 3 days of me avoiding my front windows, terrified I'd see Carol out there, measuring my lawn with a ruler and adding another $100 fine to my tab. The hope that had burned so brightly after my call with Barry began to dim, flickering like a cheap candle. It was a stupid plan. A desperate Hail Mary from a guy who was out of options. I started browse Zillow for cabins in Montana again. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. The screen flashed unknown number. Probably a telemarketer trying to sell me an extended warranty for a car I no longer possessed. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, with all the enthusiasm of a man on his way to the gallows. A voice erupted from the earpiece. A voice so loud, so booming, so full of folksy, deep-fried charisma that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Is this Chad? Chad from Crestwood Bellamy Park?" It was him. It was really him. Yes?" I squeaked. "This is Governor Bulldog Bob," the voice roared. "Son, your cousin Barry told me your story, and let me tell you, that's a damn outrage. A homeowners association telling a hardworking American man what he can and can't drive? Not on my watch. That is exactly the kind of bureaucratic, pencil-pushing, red-tape nonsense that I was elected to fight. It gets my goat, son, it really does." I was stunned into silence. I think I forgot how to form words. Governor Bulldog Bob was talking to me. "An HOA is a private contract, Governor," a quieter, more reedy voice said in the background. It must have been an aide. "Our legal team has some concerns about the precedent." "Precedent, schmeccident," the governor bellowed, cutting him off. "The precedent is that we stand with the people. Chad here is the people. And this woman, this Carol, she sounds like a real piece of work. A tin-pot dictator of the cul-de-sac. We gotta fight back, son. We gotta show 'em that freedom isn't just a word in a history book." "So, what happens now?" I managed to stammer. "What happens now is my legal team, who are a bunch of nervous Nellies but they're the best, are drafting an executive order as we speak. We're gonna designate your Jeep, what did you call it, the Beast? I love it! We're gonna designate the Beast as an official state emergency response and mobile command vehicle." I choked. A what? A mobile command vehicle. It's perfect. When there's a flood or a tornado or a particularly nasty HOA meeting, you'll be our man on the ground, symbolically, of course, he added quickly. Don't go driving into any actual tornadoes. But the point is, your Jeep will be an official asset of the State Emergency Management Agency. Let's see that HOA board tow a piece of state property. They'll be looking at a felony. He let out a laugh that sounded like a rock slide. My people will be in touch, Chad. You hang in there. We're gonna get your beast back. The line went dead. I stood in my living room, my phone still pressed to my ear, my jaw on the floor. This was happening. This was actually, certifiably happening. The next afternoon, a car pulled up to my curb. Not a regular car, but a black sedan with government plates. A young man in a crisp suit, looking deeply unhappy to be in a place as beige as Crestwood Bellamy Park, walked to my door. He carried a thick, important-looking manila envelope. Chad? He asked, not meeting my eyes. That's me. From the governor's office, he said, handing me the envelope. You'll find the executive order, notarized and filed with the Secretary of State. Also, 2 magnetic vehicle seals and a letter for your homeowners association. He said the last 2 words with a visible shudder of distaste. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. A man escaping a bad dream. I took the envelope inside, my hands trembling slightly. I tore it open. It was all there. A document printed on thick, creamy parchment, festooned with gold foil seals and elaborate, swooping signatures. It declared my 2020 Jeep Wrangler, VIN number and all, to be Mobile Command Vehicle 1, an official asset of the state. Then I pulled out the magnetic seals. They were circular, with the state crest in the middle, and the words, State Emergency Management, Official Vehicle, wrapped around it. Finally, the letter. It was addressed to the Board of the Crestwood Bellamy Park Homeowners Association. The language was cold, hard, and utterly glorious legalese. It cited state statutes, the executive order, and warned of severe criminal penalties for anyone who interferes with, impedes, moves, or otherwise molests official state property. Molests? I whispered with glee. My first stop was the bank, where I cashed the check that had been tucked inside the envelope. The memo line simply read, Vehicle Outfitting. Bulldog Bob was a man of vision. My second stop was Reliable Towing. I walked into the grimy little office, a fat wad of cash in one hand and the governor's executive order in the other. Gus was in his usual spot, still working on what I assumed was the same crossword puzzle. Back again, he grunted, not looking up. Here for my Jeep, I said, peeling off 6 $100 bills and sliding them under the plexiglass. $5.50 for the fees, and a $50 tip for being so helpful. He finally looked up, his eyes widening slightly at the cash. He counted it slowly, then looked at me. Where's the slip? Don't need one, I said, sliding the executive order under the glass instead. It's government property now. Gus picked up the order. He read it. His bushy eyebrows climbed his forehead. He read it again. He looked from the paper to me, then back to the paper. A low whistle escaped his lips. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. He reached under the counter and produced my keys. She's all yours. Agent. Driving the beast out of that lot was one of the top 5 moments of my life. But our journey wasn't over. We had one more stop to make. Extreme Off-Road Outfitters. The place was a temple of steel, rubber, and testosterone. I walked up to the counter, where 2 guys in greasy coveralls were arguing about the merits of different shock absorbers. They were Dave and Ricky, the grizzled, no-nonsense proprietors. Gentlemen, I said, trying to sound as official as possible. I have a special project for you. Yeah, what is it? Dave asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Another lift kit for a mall crawler? Nope, I said, spreading the executive order on the counter like a battle map. I need you to help me outfit a state-of-the-art mobile command vehicle. They both leaned over and read the order. There was a long silence. Ricky started to snicker. Dave just stared at it, a slow grin spreading across his face. So let me get this straight, Dave said. The governor made your Jeep a government car to stick it to your HOA? That's the gist of it, I confirmed. Ricky, Dave said, turning to his partner, cancel my afternoon. We're doing this. For the next 4 hours, we transformed the beast. Okay, I said. I need it to look official. Like end-of-the-world official. You want the Federal Witness Protection Package or the full zombie apocalypse? Ricky asked, already rummaging through a bin of wiring harnesses. Let's lean toward zombie apocalypse, I said. They went to work with an almost holy zeal. A massive 8-foot communications antenna, which Dave admitted was just a modified CB whip, was bolted to the rear bumper. A small, black satellite dish, which Ricky confessed was a wok he'd painted and bolted upside down, was installed on the roof. They added 2 long, flexible antennas to the front fenders that whipped around dramatically. The pièce de résistance was a bank of emergency lights on the roof rack and a PA system so loud it could probably curdle milk from 50 yards away. You realize none of this actually does anything, right? Dave said, as he connected the light bar to a switch panel on my dash full of impressive-looking, but completely fake, buttons. This red one, for instance. It's not connected to anything, but it looks cool, don't it? It's perfect, I said, my voice filled with awe. By the time they were done, my Jeep looked less like a car and more like a secret DARPA project that had escaped from Area 51. It was beautiful. It was absurd. It was the most glorious thing I had ever seen. I slapped the magnetic state seals onto the doors. They clung with a satisfying thump. Mobile Command Vehicle 1 was operational. I drove home slowly, savoring the moment. I pulled into my driveway, parking the beast in the exact same spot it had been stolen from. The bristling array of antennas and the gleaming official seals seemed to mock the beige serenity of the neighborhood. Then, I did the only thing left to do. I pulled out a lawn chair, set it up on my driveway, cracked open a fresh, cold beer, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. It took less than 5 minutes. The front door of Carol's house flew open with such force I thought it might come off the hinges. She stormed out, her face a terrifying shade of crimson that was definitely not on the HOA-approved color palette. She was marching across her lawn, a woman on a holy warpath. "Chad!" she shrieked, the name ripping through the quiet afternoon air. "What is the meaning of this? I thought we had an understanding." I took a calm, leisurely sip of my beer, letting the cold liquid soothe my soul. "Good afternoon, Carol," I said, giving her a little wave. "Lovely day for state business." Her eyes, wide with fury, scanned the transformed beast. She saw the antennas, the light bar, the official seals. Her brain seemed to short-circuit. This monstrosity. You are in violation of 16 bylaws. This is even worse than before. I am calling the tow truck right now and having this thing melted down for scrap." She fumbled in her pocket for her phone. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said calmly. I stood up, walked over to her, and handed her the letter from the governor's office. "I think you'll want to read this first." She snatched the letter from my hand. Her eyes, burning with rage, scanned the first few lines. The rage began to curdle into confusion. Her lips moved as she read the words, "Executive Order, State Emergency Management Agency, and Official State Property." Her face, which had been red, began to pale, going from crimson to a blotchy pink, then to a pasty, terrified white. She sputtered, This is a joke! It's a forgery! It's fraud! I'm calling the police!" "I was hoping you would," I said with a grin. And as if on cue, a familiar police cruiser turned onto our street and glided to a stop. Officer Miller got out, his hand on his hip, his face set in that permanently weary expression. "Folks," he began, "dispatch got a call about a disturbance. What seems to be the... Whoa!" He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes locking onto my Jeep. "What in the Mad Max is that?" Carol, seeing her salvation, shoved the governor's letter at him. "Officer, arrest this man. He's forged a government document. He's impersonating a state official." Officer Miller took the letter. He read it carefully. He looked at the thick parchment, the gold foil seal, the official letterhead. He looked over at me. I gave him a small, respectful salute. He looked at the magnetic seal on the Jeep's door. And then the most beautiful thing in the world happened. A tiny smile, a flicker of pure, unadulterated amusement, tugged at the corner of his mouth. He fought it down, clearing his throat and assuming the most official, serious tone he could muster. "Ma'am," he said to Carol, his voice flat and authoritative. "According to this official, notarized executive order from the office of the governor, this vehicle is the property of the state of... well, this state. As such, it is exempt from all local ordinances, including..." He squinted at the letter for effect. "Including any and all homeowner association bylaws regarding aesthetic harmony." Carol's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. No sound came out. "In fact, ma'am," Officer Miller continued, clearly starting to enjoy himself, "this letter explicitly states that to interfere with it in any way, including but not limited to ordering it to be towed, could be considered a felony. Obstruction of government operations." He handed the letter back to her. Her hand was trembling. The paper fluttered in her grasp. "So my advice to you, ma'am," Officer Miller said, tipping his hat to me slightly, "is to have a nice, quiet afternoon. Chad, agent, keep up the good work." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving me standing on my driveway next to my glorious, ridiculous, state-sanctioned weapon of mass destruction. Carol stood frozen on the sidewalk, her face a mask of utter, soul-shattering defeat. Her beige kingdom had fallen, and I, the humble, hungover IT guy, was its new king. The reign of terror was over. The aftermath was glorious. My cousin Barry, smelling blood in the water, wrote the story for Capitals and Coffee. The headline was a masterpiece of clickbait genius. How my cousin and Governor Bulldog Bob used a Jeep to take down an HOA tyrant. It exploded. It was picked up by the local news affiliate, then a national wire service. Suddenly, I was a folk hero. My face was on TV, standing next to the beast. I was the everyman who fought back against the petty tyrants. I was a symbol of freedom, liberty, and the right to have ridiculously oversized tires. Governor Bulldog Bob, never one to miss a PR opportunity, leaned into it hard. His office scheduled a press conference in my driveway. The cul-de-sac was transformed into a media circus. News vans with satellite dishes on top, real ones, not painted walks, lined the street. Reporters trampled the HOA-approved lawns. My neighbors, who had previously lived in fear of Carol's clipboard, were now on their porches, cheering. Mrs. Henderson brought me a plate of cookies. Mr. Gable gave me a thumbs up and whispered, "Stick it to her, man." Governor Bob arrived in a motorcade, strode onto my driveway, and shook my hand vigorously for the cameras. "This is what we're about, folks!" He boomed into a bouquet of microphones, one arm slung around my shoulder. "Freedom! The right to own a damn good American Jeep without some busybody board telling you it's not the right shade of beige. When government gets in the way of the people, it's a problem. When your neighbor gets in your way, you call a guy like Chad, a true patriot. I just stood there, grinning like an idiot, while the governor of my state used my personal vendetta as a political rallying cry. Across the street, I could see a curtain twitch in Carol's window. She was a prisoner in her own beige fortress, forced to watch my televised coronation. Life in Crestwood Bellamy Park was different now. I had become the de facto ruler of the cul-de-sac. People came to me with their problems. Chad, Carol says my bird bath is non-compliant. Chad, I got a warning because my welcome mat is too welcoming. I would dispense justice from the driver's seat of my mobile command vehicle, usually by just parking it in front of the offending neighbor's house for an hour until Carol retreated. It was a surprisingly effective strategy. A week later, just as things were starting to feel normal again, or as normal as they could be when your car looks like it's preparing for interplanetary war, I got a call. It was a crisp, efficient-sounding woman from the governor's office. Chad, this is Amelia from Governor Bob's scheduling office. Hi, Amelia. Is everything okay? Everything is fantastic. The governor's approval ratings are up 3 points since the HOA incident, as we're calling it. He's thrilled. In fact, he has a small request. A request? There's a grand opening for the new Oak Valley Bridge on Saturday. A big ceremony. The governor would be honored, she said, her voice full of forced enthusiasm, if you would lead the inaugural procession across it in the command vehicle. I froze. You want me to lead a parade in my Jeep? The symbolism would be fantastic, Amelia chirped. The vehicle that bridges the gap between the government and the people, it's perfect. I looked out my window at the beast. I looked at the impressive bank of switches on the dashboard that Dave and Ricky had installed. I suddenly had a terrifying realization I had no idea how to even turn on the flashing lights. The big red button, the one that looked the most important, wasn't connected to anything. My quiet suburban life was officially over. I was an accidental hero, a reluctant parade leader, and the undisputed king of a beige kingdom. I had gotten my Jeep back. I had put a tyrant in her place, and I had become a weirdly specific political symbol. I went outside and slapped a new bumper sticker on the back of the beast, right below the one about my mom's Prius. It read, "Official business, no seriously." I was sitting in the driver's seat, my throne, studying a hastily downloaded PDF manual for a Stryker 8000 light bar that I probably didn't even have, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. This is Carol from 15 Tulip Lane. My front sprinkler head is broken. It's spraying water all over the sidewalk. According to Bylaw 14, Section 8, that's an HOA maintenance issue. Can you help? I read the text. Then I read it again. A decade of HOA terror, a reign of passive-aggressive notes and soul-crushing fines had ended. And it was replaced by this, a request, a plea for help, to me. A slow smile spread across my lips. I sighed, the sigh of a man with a heavy but glorious burden. My life was never going to be simple again, and frankly, it was a hell of a lot more fun this way. I started the engine. The deep, throaty roar of the beast echoed through the perfectly manicured and now slightly less tyrannical streets of Crestwood Bellamy Park. I typed back a simple reply. On my way. The adventure, it seemed, was just beginning.